It's time to review the BronyCon documentary. Oh, how I have been looking forward to this for a while. Now, the first few minutes were an alright introduction, I guess. I find the talking head style of interview and storytelling in documentaries to be a bit dry, but I guess I can let it slide considering it didn't last for too long, and perhaps my attention span isn't as long as I believe it to be, but I found myself tempted to tab over to do something else while listening to this segment play in the background.
This phenomenon of brony conventions clearly was foretold in the book of Revelation.
Dear sweet God, really? Hang on a second, I've got to double check this. Revelations, you say, huh? Let's see here. I see bits about houses turning against each other. For horsemen, not horses, and only four. Let's see, the harlot wearing purple. Nope, I don't see anything about cartoons in here. Seriously, what is this? Okay, Brony, calm down and let's think of the possibilities. A. This man let whatever silly predetermination he had get the better of him, and he said something that he didn't mean. B. He thinks his audience is so stupid that they don't know something this specific isn't in Revelations. But how could he think that? I don't watch news on television anymore, but I know a lot of other Christians that do, and any one of them who have paid attention to their studies of Revelations would know that this is just not right. C. He's grossly misinterpreting something in Revelations to make him think what he just said. And if that's the case, I'd kind of like to know which specific verse he was thinking of when that ridiculousness crossed his mind. D. He never really read Revelations, and for whatever reason that I'm sure is his own, he's talking square out of his own dock. The stories they covered were somewhat interesting as well, although admittedly not as hard-hitting as I had expected them to be. For example, the teenager from Maine who was nervous about what his parents might think. I think the documentary tried to make this story into a lot bigger deal than it really was. He was nervous. He told his parents. At first they weren't certain of what to think, but they were still supportive. It's really quite normal and not a big deal at all. The parents didn't strike me as the type that would have brought any kind of considerable consequences to this type of news, which is exactly what they did. They did not bring any type of considerable consequence to this type of news, so there really wasn't anything at stake to begin with. However, I think I know what this story was supposed to be to the documentary. This strikes me as the type of story meant to show how the previous generation and our families may react to something like the Brony phenomenon, and some of the understandable reluctancies that they would have in order to get involved. This would have been portrayed a lot better if they had spun it from the father's perspective during the whole time, and it would have been a much better build-up to the bit in the back half where Mr. Delancey introduces the two fathers at BronyCon. Then afterwards, interview Lyle's father again to ask him if his opinions have changed and show his response whether it has or not.
Before I watched the show, I was kind of sad and lonely.
Now he segued right from there into how that when he got into the show, it opened up the Brony community to him. And that's great, I'm very happy for you, Lyle. But I kind of want to know exactly what you were sad about and how you were lonely. Now, buddy, you look like a nice kid to me, and that is definitely a nice house in middle-class Maine with two very supportive parents that you have there. And the way your father talked about how he practices marksmanship with you, it sounds like you see plenty of quality time with them. So please indulge my curiosity. What exactly were you sad about? I mean, I have theories and I could make guesses from my own past experiences, but I'd rather not take the risk of making an assumption and having it be wrong. But it would have been good information for this type of thing, especially if you want us to sympathize with your story, or run the risk of having someone like me tear into you for complaining about nothing. If that were the case, I don't know.
Having Asperger's is, I really can't explain it. It's basically not being able to understand maybe people's emotions at a time, or understand why someone would do something on an emotional level.
Is that all of what Asperger's is to you, buddy? You know that stuff can be taught and learned, right? You know, I've seen this diagnosis get thrown around a lot, as well as received it myself, but about 75% of the time it means absolutely nothing. I always attributed it to yes, it takes a little while longer to learn social context, and there's a tendency to get obsessed with certain hobbies or things, whatever. Sometimes it's definitely noticeable and needs to be worked on, but everything he mentioned here as traits of Asperger's can easily be disciplined and practiced even with oneself should the desire exist. Now, I'd be more interested in knowing exactly how this came into play as he was growing up, but they never really got into that. Perhaps it was something, perhaps it was nothing like it usually is. I'll probably never know. But it's best to have these things explained when making a documentary that focuses on a few different stories like this. Though I understand that this is just starting to give us a foothold to expand how he's opening up because of Buck and being a brony, but that doesn't really change anything. We need to know about one's past in order to fully understand their present and perhaps whatever we can guess of their future. The information here just isn't sufficient.
With his rifle he had been hunting with, I got pretty scared at that point. And, he was playfully aiming it at me like, you gotta stop this pony, you little gay girly shit, and...
Oh my gosh, that's no good at all. But I'm glad you're all right though, Alex. Good job. You handled that situation as well as anyone could. Now tell me, whatever happened to the people that threatened you?
And then I come home, and then, of course, my father saw the damage to the car, and he was a little angry, and I just had to explain to him, like, oh, I ran off the road or something. Or...
What? No, you should have told him everything. These people should have been ratted out big time and put in jail. If you want to teach someone like this a lesson to prevent it from happening again in the future, and maybe even help clear up the overarching issue, you have to create a consequence. I know I've said all this before. Under no circumstance, especially in this situation where there could have easily been repercussions for the guilty party, should threats with firearms be taken lightly. And Alex, you need Krav Maga classes. I'll be in North Carolina shortly, and we'll get this sorted out the right way. I absolutely loved the bit about the psychologist's analysis of the Bronies, and I wish that there was a lot more of that in the documentary, as well as taking a closer look at their data.
I've watched all the episodes of My Little Pony, in part because when I'm interacting with the Bronies, I like to know what they mean by terms like 20% cooler.
Awesome. Now tell me, what did you as yourself think about what you saw in the show?
And we have begun to call this the WWPD factor. What would a pony do?
I'm sorry, what? Okay, I guess that works for some people, but I think I'll stick to the original version of that phrase, lest I ask myself, what would a pony do? And the answer is this.
Make a friendship problem. We're involved in brony culture, and we demand our inclusion. We attend all the conventions, create art and music too, discuss the show, talk on forums, everything that these dudes do.
Lovely. Now let's proceed to go the rest of the documentary with minimal mention of the females at the convention. Okay, granted, I know, they talk to a couple of ladies and an overwhelming majority of bronies are male. I believe Cudpug has done some more in-depth discussions on what exactly it's like to be a Pegasister. Though that part of the song did show that not all bronies are male, I personally wouldn't have recommended having it in there without actually balancing out the sex's exposure a bit more in this documentary.
Purple Tinker's poster ended up selling for $4,050.
What? That's more than my car costs, and it's still not paid off. Who has that kind of money? And may I join you in whatever it is you do so that I may also have $4,000 to give to charity?
It was hard. I regret that I had to leave, but I don't regret the decision to leave.
You know, I'm not really certain I know why you left, and I'm a tad curious. I'm just putting that out there, though. It's not a huge deal.
Meine Hobbys ausleben zu können mit meinem Partner, ohne dass ich Angst haben muss, dass er es nicht toleriert, sondern ganz im Gegenteil, er lebt es mit mir aus, mit mir gemeinsam, nicht nur über My Little Pony, sondern allgemein.
Aw, isn't that sweet? Why won't anything like that ever happen to me? Overall, it was an enjoyable documentary, and I liked the people whose stories were followed. I just wish it had gotten a little bit more in-depth and balanced out the issues, such as the negative parts of the fandom, the fact that there is still infighting, bullying, obsessive and militant bronies, and things of that nature. Another thing to touch on is how the stigmas behind liking MLP could cause you to lose something. Alex was threatened with a shotgun for liking the show, but that's about all we saw. He survived an encounter with a firearm, and I'm very happy for him. But he still had a family to go home to at the end of it, and that always makes everything better. The families of Lyle and Daniel never stopped being supportive either. I'm bringing this up because people have lost relationships, friends, and family from being ostracized for being a brony. Now, I'm not such a terrible person that I would want to see that happen to someone. I mean, shoot, I've lost a couple of things myself, in part due to being a fan of this show. I'm just saying that it would have been a good thing to see in the documentary. It would have been great for an outsider to see exactly how bad it can get over something so menial and help drive the anti-bullying message that the documentary supposedly had. But it's certainly a good, if a quite long, introduction to what a brony is and the community's potential for good to someone who may be on the outside and looking in. So don't let my criticisms through this video fool you. I enjoyed it a lot, and there were only a few things that I had to say. At that, most of what I did have to say were about the people in the documentary and not the documentary itself. However, there are things that could have been done slightly differently that would have made it a much better documentary, and hopefully I'll get to see something like that in the future. If you have a topic on bronies, ponies, news, or anything in general that you would like to hear discussed, or if you have an episode, fanfiction, product, or anything else you would like to hear reviewed, send me a YouTube message or leave a comment below. You can also drop comments, questions, topic suggestions, and review suggestions by liking Brony Debates on Facebook, following on Twitter, or sending an email to bronydebates@yahoo.com. Have a great day, and I look forward to speaking with all of you soon.